if the US is to win the competition against China, because they have said clearly that China is their main economic, technological, political rival. China is the only country in the international system with the intent and capability to want to replace the US in the international system. So they see clearly if that they want to win this global competition from China, they need a partnership with a country like India with 1.4 billion people, very strong human capital and tech human capital.
Just ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration as president for his second term, we're looking at the India-US relationship and some of the issues that come up. I'm going to discuss with my guest, Arun Singh, who was ambassador to the US from 2015 to 2016. Arun Singh, welcome. Glad to have you again.
Thanks, Surya.
Uh, does Donald Trump have a vision for the India relationship? We've seen that in Clinton, we saw that in the Bush tenure. What about Trump?
I think Trump clearly has a vision for what is in his political interest, and then other visions derive from that. So, as part of that, no, certainly he attaches value to the India relationship, and that was clear in Trump 1.0. You'd recall that even before he had got elected in 2016, he had reached out to the Indian American community in the US. He had addressed gatherings of the Indian American community and spoken positively about the relationship with India. And during his first term, several positive steps were taken. He revived the Quad of India, US, Japan, and Australia, which had been languishing since 2007. He started talking for the first time for a US president of the strategy of the Indo-Pacific, expressing clearly that they saw India as a valuable partner in the context of their strategies, economic and other strategies in the broader Asia and the Pacific region. The Hawaii-based Pacific Command of the United States Army was renamed the Indo-Pacific Command. It was in his tenure that the 2+2 meeting of the foreign and defense ministers of the two countries simultaneously, which both countries do with very few partners, was started. And he placed India on what was called STA Level 1, Strategic Trade Authorization Level 1, for technology releases, they said, on par with NATO partners of the United States. So he clearly saw value in the bilateral relationship. And in the context of the challenge that the US was facing from China, I think the message from the US was that they saw a strong India in its own right, even if it was not overtly anti China, to be a natural constraint on some unilateral and assertive postures that China might take. And you'd recall that Donald Trump was the first US president in whose tenure the US national security strategy, national defense strategy, came out with clear articulation that they saw China as their main adversary. So, in the framework of all that, he certainly has a vision for the India relationship.
What about two key appointments he's made, that of Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz? We know they have strong anti-China credentials. Do they have also something about India? Or do they, in their speeches and interactions, have they indicated anything for India?
So both of them have repeatedly said that they value the India relationship. If you look at Mike Waltz, who was so far a member of the US House of Representatives, and he's going to be the National Security Advisor. So he was co-chair of the India Caucus. And as part of the co-chair of the India Caucus, from what I understand, he closely followed the US-India relationship. And even in the Biden administration, he encouraged members of the administration to take positive steps related to India. And they knew that he was interested. Last year on our Independence Day, 15th August, he was visiting India along with some other members of Congress and was present at the celebrations at the Red Fort that day. He's written several articles in newspapers, magazines, talking of a stronger partnership, in fact, a stronger alliance between the United States and India. So Mike Waltz himself has been fairly focused on the India-US relationship. And the expectation generally, if you look at analysts in the US, analysts in India, they see that the relationship will advance positively as far as he's concerned. You may recall that recently there was a discussion event at the US Institute of Peace, where traditionally they bring together the incoming and outgoing national security advisors. So
Yeah.
Jake Sullivan and Mike Waltz were having a conversation. And Jake Sullivan said that they're very excited to have you as a national security advisor in India. And they're looking forward to this partnership. Similarly, Marco Rubio, as senator, has been speaking very, very positively about the India relationship. He said that, for instance, because India was a member of Quad, CATSA-related sanctions that the US has, the Countering American Adversaries Against Sanctions Act, related to India's purchases from Russia, should not be imposed. He also suggested there should be higher level technology releases for India. And in fact, he moved a resolution in the US Senate calling for strengthening of the India US defense partnership. And both Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio have been very, very hawkish on China. So they see the value of the India relationship even in that context. So I think from both of them, there have been clear messages in the past that from the bilateral interest as well as the challenge from China, both of them attach importance to the India relationship.
So, from the Indian point of view, what do we want from Trump? What is our vision for this?
So, look, I would say that uh, for India today, we have many important partners. Russia is an important partner. There are several other countries. Countries in Europe are important partners.
Yeah.
But US is the one with which we have the most strong, comprehensive relationship. US is our largest trading partner. US investment in India is more than $60 billion, and it is the largest single country investor in India. Indian companies have invested more than $40 billion in the US, and it's the largest Indian investment outside India. And they have a presence across all 40 states, all 50 states in the US. We have today 5.2 million Indian Americans in the United States. Again, largest single country presence of Indian origin diaspora. There are almost 300,000 Indian students in US universities doing their studies, looking at further job opportunities in the US. And we have a very strong defense partnership with the US. In the last 20 years, we've contracted to buy more than $20 billion worth of defense supplies. Now we are talking of a defense technology partnership. So if you look at it in this framework, in terms of our comprehensive national interest, US is our most valuable partner. So what we would like from the US clearly to continue enabling trade development, continue enabling investment consolidation, higher levels of investment, but even more important, something that was given a push during the Biden administration, a partnership in critical and emerging technologies, the artificial intelligence, quantum, biotech, semiconductors, defense, space, because these technologies are going to transform the way we live, the way we work. And it is leadership in these technologies that will determine which are the countries that are leaders of the future. So in many of these areas, new cooperation frameworks have been established. So I think it would be important for India that this level of technology partnership with the US is continued and consolidated further.
Given Donald Trump's plans to revitalize manufacturing in the US, especially high tech manufacturing, do you see a conflict there with India's own plans in the same area?
So not necessarily. After all, US cannot do everything, even if they want to bring manufacturing back to the US. And it is important that they bring manufacturing back to the US for various reasons. The Chinese GDP, for example, is today about 17 or 18% of the global GDP. But they are responsible today for 32% of the global manufacturing. So global manufacturing is heavily concentrated in China. That is not good from economic perspective. It is not good from logistics perspective, and it is not good for national security perspective for any country. So there is a need to diversify manufacturing, and in fact, in the US, the reason they want to bring back manufacturing to the US One is from the national security angle because they need to produce also what they need for defense and for higher levels of technology. But they need to create jobs in the US. You know, the middle 40% of the US population, because manufacturing has moved to China, they've seen their jobs go away. Wages have stagnated, death rates have gone up, drug addiction has gone up. So he needs to do that. But at the same time, for efficiency, they cannot do everything in the United States. Production has to be done in other countries also. So I think the broad message, uh, and you see that in the US also, but from India's perspective too, is that if the US is to win the competition against China, because they have said clearly that China is their main economic, technological, political rival. China is the only country in the international system with the intent and capability to want to replace the US in the international system. So they see clearly if that they want to win this global competition from China, they need a partnership with a country like India with 1.4 billion people, very strong human capital and tech human capital. You know, for example, 20% of the availability of engineers in semiconductor design globally is located in India. So US companies need this partnership. So I think make in US or make in India are not necessarily contradictory. There is a way of synergizing both.
So, in areas like, say, space, do you see the two countries moving closer, maybe even the internet?
No, so in space they have done already quite a bit. You know, before the initiative on critical and emerging technologies was launched, cooperation in space was a little more limited. But since then, if you see, there are reports that the joint NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar satellite, which a very powerful $1 billion satellite, is likely to be launched this year, in the early part of this year. US and India are looking at mounting a joint mission to the International Space Station. US is partnering in the training of an Indian astronaut, and efforts have been made to bring together Indian and US companies, private sector companies in space, for working together for several missions. And the US Space Force has placed orders on two Indian companies for supplies to the US Space Force. And that again shows a level of confidence that there is there in the relationship. And India has joined the Artemis Accord, where US plays one of the leading roles for cooperation related for now for the lunar missions. And there are only about 35, 36 countries who are members of the Artemis Accord. So there is growing US-India cooperation in space. And I think I can clearly see that there is an effort from both sides to deepen that further.
Mhm. I just wanted to ask a question on the Quad. I know Trump had revitalized the Quad. Does he have a different vision of it now?
So we'll have to watch Surya because, as you mentioned, Trump was the one that revitalized the Quad. After 2007, Quad was not meeting. So
Yeah.
they initially started meeting at mid-official level, and it was during the Trump administration that the Quad met at the foreign minister level. Now, the Biden administration took it further by convening Quad meetings at the summit level. And six summit level meetings were held for the Quad, four of them in person, two virtually. And the last meeting of the Quad was in September 2024, and the Prime Minister had gone, the Indian Prime Minister had gone to Delaware for that meeting. So that's what they had done, elevated it to the summit level and widened the topics and issues for cooperation. So what we need to watch is that while there is clear support for the Quad, to what extent would Donald Trump also want to engage himself at summit level meetings and messaging related to the Quad? So that's something for the future because, as you see in his inauguration on the 20th, in terms of what has come out in the public domain, some heads of state government are being perhaps invited, but the Quad countries have been invited at the foreign minister level. And
Yeah.
so a clear signal that importance is attached to the Quad, but at the moment, immediately a foreign minister level engagement. But let's see how they build on that further.
Right. Arun Singh, I want to ask you about the noise and hullabaloo about H-1B and Indian immigrants and illegal immigrants also. Does this have the potential to spoil the relationship?
So it depends on how both countries play it. So at one level, as a society, I'm sure we don't want to encourage illegal immigration to the United States.
Absolutely.
And I don't think the Indian government would want to encourage illegal immigration. At the personal level, all those who involve themselves in illegal immigration go through tremendous hardships, either
True.
on the route or even when they get into the US. And many of them are exploited in terms of long working hours, low
Yeah.
wages, and other conditions. But for whatever reason, looking for job opportunity, other reasons, they make that effort. Now, that having been said, from reports that have come out in the public domain, it seems there are about more than 18,000 people who the US says are Indians who are in detention for illegal immigration from the US. According to one report, 20% of the people who were apprehended last year coming through illegally from Canada were Indian nationals. I mean, that's in the report, we don't know. So certainly there will be a pressure from the US to deport them, for India to take them back. Now, here the issue will be that before you accept them, you have to verify their nationality.
Yeah, yeah.
Because very often these people, once they go across illegally, first thing they do is throw away their passports. And they say they don't know where they come from, so it's difficult to establish identity.
Yeah.
Also, I understand from the past that people from some other parts of South Asia, believing that Indians will get a better treatment, declare themselves as Indian, even though they are not Indian nationals. So there will be a need for the Indian government to verify their nationality. But the US should not feel that there is some kind of a deliberate policy of delaying that nationality verification. So I think
Yeah.
the two governments will have to handle that carefully. Because, if many of them have been in the US for some time and have families there doing the job, so uprooting them, there will be emotional aspects to that. The H-1B visa, again, there is a certain political play around that. There's been an argument, it goes up and down that, jobs from the US are being taken away. Others argue that these are high-skilled nationals. The jobs that they are doing are jobs that Americans are not available for. So there are many supporters of the H-1B. So even when the numbers go down, as has happened in the past, the bulk of the H-1B visa is still given to Indians because they bring certain skills. So I think we should watch how that dimension plays out, because the US realizes that they need these people as part of their global competition with China. Otherwise, there will be consequences for them also. But even there, if they reduce the numbers, let's say, going into the US, but they hire them in India, the companies, to do the
Yeah.
work here, because you'd have seen, for example, the number of global capability centers, multinational setting up centers in India to support their global operations, not just the Indian activity, has increased tremendously. So there are 1,700 today. The numbers are expected to go up to 2,400 by 2030. So if more global capability centers come up, Indians are working there, then the second order income generation, because then they will be spending in India, not spending in the US. So that will have a better impact in India. So I think there are pros and cons. I feel we should handle the H-1B visa issue calmly through dialogue, to pointing out to the mutual benefit to both countries, rather than getting too worked up about it.
Good. Last question. India's preference for strategic autonomy, its decision to go it alone on various issues, whether trading with the Russians, buying oil from them, could this be an issue?
Well, whether it is an issue or not, it is clear that India must retain its strategic autonomy of decision making. Because if you look at the US, for example, their decisions are not based on what they see to be in the interest of other countries. They take decisions based on what they see to be in their interest. If
Yeah.
today Donald Trump says that he will stop assistance to Ukraine, he's trying to see what does it work for him politically. And even many European countries are not very happy with the direction they see in which Donald Trump is headed. And if they see Donald Trump as pushing Ukraine in a certain direction, contrary to what the Europeans perceive as their interest, there could be fissures between US and Europe. Uh,
Yeah.
so, so I think ultimately every country has to figure out where its own interests lie, and it has to build up its own strengths to be able to sustain its interests, and use various partnerships to build up its capacity to be able to take independent decisions. It's vital. Otherwise, there will come a point
Yeah.
when that particular country takes a decision in its own interest that you're not comfortable with. For example, US withdrew from Afghanistan suddenly in 2021, unmindful of whatever may be the consequences for countries in the region, including India, because they assess that to be in their interest or the political interests of President Biden. So yeah, I think it's important, whatever be the cost, to maintain your strategic autonomy.
So perhaps the US has to relearn how to deal with a non-ally in that sense.
Yes, and even some of their allies don't always listen to what they are saying. If you look at
Yeah.
Israel,
Yeah.
President Biden repeatedly asked Israel to act in a different way in the context of Gaza, and the Israeli Prime Minister didn't follow their suggestions at all. So it's not just non-ally, but even allies of the US will take decisions based on what they see to be in their interest. And I think US has to adjust more and more to that.
On that note, Arun Singh, thank you very much. As always, great talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suri.
That's all we have for you on this broadcast. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on social media. Thank you very much. Good day.